In today's prepping quick tip, I want to talk about food storage. And as you just get interested in preparedness or you start along this journey, you are going to see it everywhere. If food storage is one of the biggest parts of prepping, and there are entire websites dedicated just to food storage. And that's because there are a lot of different aspects to this and a lot of different things you can do. In today's video, I just want to go through some of the basic stuff, some of the different techniques, some of the different ideas, and help you kind of get started, and then you can expand on all of that as you go along. So what I'll do first is I'll talk about some best practices, and then we'll get into the different ideas and different types. First off, store what you eat. Oh, you'll hear this a lot in the preparedness community is eat what you store and store what you eat. This is to minimize as much as possible anyway, the waste that you might have, whether that be wasting money on food that you get a great deal on it, but your family's not going to eat it. So in a couple of years, you end up throwing it out anyway. And that's the second part of the waste is the expiration and, tossing food out and not using it. So store what you eat. Eat what you store. This is, I think, maybe one of the most important rules when it comes to prepared or food storage. Also, look for foods with longer shelf lives. And like I said, the more you do this, the more you're going to get a better idea of how all of this stuff works. But like spaghettis, boxed cereals, pancake mix, stuff like that you can put on your shelf. It's got a year or two shelf life, and you don't have to worry about it all that much, especially if you're following that first rule of store what you eat. You're probably going to use it, even if everything maintains and there isn't some sort of disaster scenario, you're probably going to use it before it expires anyway. So look for that longer term shelf life stuff. Also, a good rule of thumb too is first in, first out. The way I do my food storage is I treat it like a restaurant. I have a area of my home where I put all the stuff to begin with, and then it moves its way up into the kitchen, into the pantry, and gets used. So make sure that you've got your inventory, your rotation, all of that stuff is ironed out, because that will save, just like store what you eat, that will save you a lot of waste as well, a majority of the waste actually. And then the last best practice here is figure out a game plan before you go out and fill up a couple shopping carts worth of food and get home and then stuff it in every nook and cranny of your house. Try to fit it. Look at where you're going to be able to put this stuff to where you're going to be able to rotate it. That way it's not stuffed all the way in the back of the cabinet. Look at how much you can actually get. Write down the things that your family eats on a regular basis, that those are the majority of what you're going to get, and figure out how you're going to be able to store those and rotate those and all of that stuff. So figure out your game plan before you just jump out and spend a whole bunch of money. All right, so let's go through, let's start, I guess, with the pantry. In your pantry, this is where the bulk of your food storage is going to be. And I suppose this depends on your situation. If you live in an apartment or a small home or just don't have a lot of room, maybe you are going to have to, we're going to talk about it in a bit, that long-term food storage, the buckets, the stuff that stores nice and neatly. You get a lot of food in a small amount of space. But for most people, it's going to be the pantry. That's where a lot of especially if you have a larger family or even just a couple kids, that food in your pantry is the stuff that's going to be used all the time, and you're going to have to rotate it through. You're going to have to make sure it's organized for inventory and rotation and all that stuff. So with pantry foods, what you're looking at is like canned foods. Now, canned foods, it really depends on your diet. Everybody kind of gravitates towards the canned food stuff, but if you're not going to eat it, it's pointless to get it. Canned asparagus to me, is just terrible. So we don't have any of that. Even if you get a great deal on it, say you get it for 10 cents a can, maybe at 10 cents a can, I don't know. But say you get it at half price. If you're not going to eat it, you're still wasting that money. So it's taking up space. It just costs you money. So don't get that stuff. So if you do eat the canned vegetables, if you do eat the cans of the fruit cocktail, stuff like that, canned meats are great. Get those things, but make sure they get used. Boxed foods are also a good one in your pantry because they have that longer shelf life. And by boxed foods, they have boxed meals like the banquet meals, but boxed foods, I'm talking about like pancake mixes, cereal, crackers, stuff like that has that longer shelf life than normal stuff, granola bars and all of that. but your family eats it all the time. So that would be one of those staples in your food storage plan. Instead of getting a couple of them, maybe you figure out how many you use in a month, and you can have enough in your pantry to last that long. Now, you may think perishable foods don't have a place in long-term food storage, right? Because the refrigerator goes out and everything goes rotten and you won't have it. But not all disasters are, the grid's not going to be down depending on what the disaster is. It could be a personal doomsday. It could be a job loss, something like that, where you still have access to the food that's in the freezer. That food's going to stay frozen. Some of the stuff in the refrigerator is still going to maintain its shelf life while it's in there. Now, granted, you have stuff like milk that doesn't last that long, but there are a lot of things in your refrigerator that do have a few weeks or a month or possibly even longer than that will be useful in some sort of disaster situation. Like I said, whether it's a personal doomsday or whether it's a natural disaster where the electricity's still on, that perishable food still needs to be considered. Now, when you're talking longer term, that may not be the case, but don't disregard the perishable food. Also, spices and drinks is something that a lot of people forget about, because when you're thinking about food storage, you're thinking about, a disaster, natural disaster, personal doomsdays, whatever it is. And you're thinking about calories. You're thinking about just plain old eating. But in a situation like that, you're going to want it to taste good as well. So the spices are always important. And then drinks, if say you're in some sort of natural disaster and it's lasted a week or maybe 2 weeks, something like that. If all you're drinking is water, it's going to be pretty boring. So there is soda that stores. I don't know what the shelf life is on that. I think it's about a year. I've personally drank soda that's a couple years old. Didn't taste any different to me. I don't drink much soda though. What we do is the Mio, little Mio things where you squirt it in the water. They got the Tang. They've got all sorts of drink mixes that you can put in there. Kool-Aid, I don't know if that's a great idea, because if you think about a grid down situation of a natural disaster where the kids are going to be bored, pumping them full of sugar, I don't know how good of an idea that is. But having those drinks and all that stuff is just going to maintain that sense of normalcy. The drinks, the spices, all of these different pantry foods are going to maintain that sense of normal you have. Next, we'll move on to the long-term food stuff. And this is, like I said in the beginning, if you are in an apartment and you don't have a lot of storage space, this may be the way you want to go. It's a great way to bulk up your food storage. You can quickly bulk up from, say, 2 weeks or 2 months to, double that or triple that with this long-term food storage stuff. It's got a 15 to 25 year shelf life. It stacks nice and neatly if you get them in the buckets and all of that. Although I will say it is pretty expensive. We do sell SHTF shop from the SHTF shop. We sell legacy long-term food. But I would suggest you go with the pantry first. And if once you get into this a while, then you decide to go with some of this long-term food storage stuff, go that route. Get a hold of me. I can guide you in the right direction. But go with your pantry first, unless you have those storage issues. And then this is kind of your only choice. Again, this stuff is really expensive compared to just the regular food. It's really high in sodium, so it's not the healthiest choice. If you're thinking about stuff that you're going to be eating for long term, a couple years, not the healthiest stuff. But compared to nothing, I think eating nothing is probably a little less healthy than eating high sodium foods. But it depends on your diet as well and your health and all that stuff. So again, prepackaged food is a good way, and there's all sorts of different kinds. Like I said, I sell legacy foods because it's got you get the most bang for your buck. There's Wise Foods, there's all sorts of Augustin Farms that sell different ingredients. There's all sorts of different stuff that you can do. But figure out the basic stuff first, and then maybe gravitate or graduate to something like this. The last one that I want to talk about here today is the DIY food method. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that we can do, and this is more of the advanced type stuff. So again, like I said, start in your pantry, maybe work on some of that long-term food storage stuff if you want. Some people don't even use that long-term food, the prepackaged stuff. But there are different ingredients and different things that, like butter, powdered milk, all that stuff that, if you have a 25-year shelf life on that, it's basically a set it and forget it. But there are things you can do yourselves too that'll, for about half the cost, you can do your own buckets of flour, beans, rice. You'll see quite a bit about this stuff in preparedness as well. All really easy to do. It's really not that hard. You got to make sure and do it correctly so it's going to store properly. But it can save you a lot of money, especially being able to buy in bulk, stuff like that. It can save you a lot of money, but you have to know what to do with that stuff. So storing 50 or 100 pounds of beans is great, but you have to know some different types of recipes and how you're going to use that stuff. Storing all the flour is great, but you should probably know how to make bread or, have recipes and a use for that, because storing it is kind of pointless if you don't know how to use it, unless you're going to eat spoonfuls of flour, and that'll be kind of gross. And then we've got freeze drying. You've got freeze drying, you've got dehydrating. Those two things, freeze drying can get the Harvest Right freeze dryer is fantastic. A little bit expensive though. So while those things are good, the amount you can do, you're kind of limited unless you really get into it. If you spend the money on one of these Harvest Rights and you do it on a consistent basis and you're constantly stocking up your food storage, it's a fantastic way to do it. It's a healthier option than the prepackaged stuff, and it is stuff that your family is going to eat, that eat what you store aspect of it. So also, home canning is a great way to bulk up your food storage with stuff you make at home, that stuff that your family eats on a daily basis. If you make soups and stews or stuff like that, anything that can be canned, you can make extra. You can spend one day just making that stuff and canning it up, and you have it on your shelf for later. A lot of people in the preparedness community do home canning. Gardening, the same type of thing. Gardening is maybe that first step, and then that harvest you home can it. Gardening is a great way to bulk up your food storage. It's not going to, depending on how much room you have and how much energy you put into it, it's not going to, you're not going to have enough to last through the winter. Most people. Here we garden and we have some, but it's not, it's not that much, but it is that fresh stuff. It's more, if say there is some sort of disaster that was longer term, it's more about learning the process of gardening and learning what's going to grow and what the critters and the animals are going to eat. And it's a learning process. That way, if it ever does come down to where that's a necessity, you've already gone through that learning curve and you know how to do it. So there are a lot of DIY food methods for your long-term food storage. But this is one of those things that as you get into this for a longer period of time, you're going to figure out what's going to work for you, what's not. Maybe you'll try some things that don't work out. You need to try something else. But there are a lot of things when it comes to food storage and preparedness. My personal thoughts on it are: start in your kitchen, start in the pantry, start with the stuff that's easy to get from the grocery store. Buy a little bit extra here and there. Maybe start out with a week or two worth of food and then build yourself up from there. Figure out your game plan. Figure out where you're going to be able to put everything, rather than I need 6 months of food right now, and then you go to the store, you buy all the stuff, you max out your credit card or whatever, and then you stuff every nook and cranny of your home with that food storage. And then a few months down the line, you don't know where anything is. So start in your kitchen, start with a game plan, and then work your way up to maybe some of this long-term food storage stuff, maybe some DIY stuff and all that. As always, if you have any questions about this, you can email me at dale@survivalistprepper.net or leave a comment below the video, and I'll get back to you. But with that, take care and prepare, everyone. We'll see you in the next video.